Hi, this is 365801 and this is a reviewing LGBTQIA plus YA review video. Now the title I'm going to be reviewing for this video is The Passing Playbook. This is written by Isaac Fitzsimons and published by Penguin Random House Children's UK and is classed as LGBTQIA Teens and YA. The publication date was the 3rd of June 2021. Now, I was really lucky to get a review copy through NetGalley. This was published on the 3rd of June and I was able to get a review copy around the 22nd. So I spent the last couple of weeks of Pride Month reading through The Passing Playbook. Now, because it's a fairly new book, I hadn't really heard anything about it, unlike some others. I didn't know if Isaac Fitzsimons is a brilliant author. I didn't know anything about the author either. So I really was just going based on the summary and due to my reading preferences. And I'll go through that just now. Now, my reading goals for the year included reading more prose, and I have been doing a lot of prose reading, so this was a great opportunity to read more prose, especially due to the fact that on NetGalley I'm getting approved for manga, and so across NetGalley I really would like to read more prose as well. So the first reason I picked this up was it's a prose and I can tick that off my reading goals. It's also young adult, and I don't read a lot of books classed as young adult. Mostly it's adult and it's erotica or romance. There is some idea of YA in some of the manga that I read, but I don't think any of them would be classed as YA, although some of them really could be. They're generally classed as adult because they're under the BL heading. So yeah, a young adult novel was something new to me, and it's probably the first one on my list for this year. There is also, of course, Pride Month in the month of June, and I wanted to read some actual LGBTQIA plus works. I don't have a lot of specific LGBT titles. As I've said, most of my stuff is adult, it's erotica, and it is manga or male-male romance. But specifically LGBTQIA+, the label, I wanted to read something that was published under that during Pride Month, and I'm really pleased I did. So, 15-year-old Spencer Harris is a proud nerd, an awesome big brother, and a Messi in training. He's also transgender. After transitioning at his old school leads to a year of bullying, Spencer gets a fresh start at Oakley, the most liberal private school in Ohio. At Oakley, Spencer seems to have it all. More accepting classmates, a decent shot at a starting position on the boys' soccer team, great new friends, and maybe even something more than friendship with one of his teammates. The problem is, no one at Oakley knows Spencer is trans. He's passing. So when a discriminatory law forces Spencer's coach to bench him after he discovers the F on Spencer's birth certificate, Spencer has to make a choice: cheer his team on from the sidelines or publicly fight for his right to play, even if it means coming out to everyone, including the guy he's falling for. So this was the description that was put up on NetGalley. This is what I read, and this is what made me click, yes please, I would like to read this book. And so it did its job. It was a great summary of the plot, and yet I don't think it really did the book justice, because after reading the book, I think the book is so much more than just what the description says. It's very concise, it's succinct, it does exactly what it's supposed to because it makes you want to read the book, but the book was so much more. It was fantastic and I absolutely loved it. Now, when doing the previous review video, I did come up with some cons And so I did think it was appropriate for me to think of some cons for this book before I launch into a huge, big, long speech about how great it is. So I did have to sit down and think, what was a con? And I couldn't really think of anything until I remembered how I felt at the end. The only real con I could think of was that the ending felt just ever so slightly rushed, or maybe it came upon me too soon, or I wasn't prepared. So maybe the author could have put in a few more paragraphs here and there just to pad out what was happening with some of the characters. It felt a little too concise. I wanted more. And also the tone could have shifted to allow readers to signpost their emotions to know that the end was coming and the final page would be upon them soon. I came across the final page a little bit quicker than I was emotionally ready for. And I think that a few signposts could have helped me to emotionally prepare for feeling slightly bereft that the story was over, because I could have just kept on reading about these characters. I could have just kept on reading about their lives and their hopes and their dreams for the future, and the positive aspect that we were ending this book on. I wanted to keep on reading. I wanted to find out what happens to them, and it felt like, oh, suddenly it was over. So that emotionally preparedness could have been built in, I think, to the last paragraph certainly, or the last chapter as a whole, and then I could have felt less sad about the book ending and not being able to just continue reading. So yeah, a slightly rushed ending is the only con to this very positive book. So as I mentioned, I really had to sit and think, were there any cons at all? Because all I could think about were the pros, so many pros. This book is really well done, and there are so many great aspects about it. First of all, it is incredibly well written. I have since found out that it was a debut novel, so this is a really great job for a debut novel. I was very impressed. Not only was it well structured, the chapters were well laid out, there was great writing for descriptions, the characters felt realistic because of the writing, the details in the writing were just there. It was so realistically described that of course these characters exist. And I can fully imagine them. The writing is that good. It's like they exist in real life. They are somewhere out there in Ohio. I am sure of it. And the tone is shifting depending on which character is speaking and which character is thinking thoughts, and also using the technology of text messages and things like that to break up pages of prose. Lots of conversations and thoughts and feelings all mixed in, just giving such a great immersive read. So it's very well written. All of the different aspects, including the sports and the football, I felt like I was there and I could easily imagine what was going on the pitch as well, which is quite difficult to do sometimes, describing sports action as it happens. But yeah, it was so well written and very well done job for Isaac Fitzsimons. So many great characters. Spencer, the main character, is every teenage boy you could imagine, but he's more because he is in touch with some of the emotions that he's feeling. He's very much an emotional character. He's angry and he's upset and he is sassy and he's bossy and he's endearing and he's loving and caring and so funny when he has a crush on a boy. It's so good. Everything about Spencer just screams to me normal teenage boy going through stressful times or emotional times or things that are worrying him. And he dealt with all of them as teenage boys do, being stroppy and being moody and, using sports to distract him from these emotions. They were exactly described as I imagine and have experienced teenage boys. So yes, Spencer is a lovely character. The fact that he's described as a great big brother is very true. He is a very good big brother to Theo. His mum and his dad are hilarious, but also going through some things, and it is hard when you have a child who has gone through transitioning, and also you have an autistic child too. The stress is there, and I understand that, and you could see that in the parents, but you could also see how loving and caring and supportive they were trying to be, and always very much aware of having to try and make the best for their children, always doing what they can for their children, which is really nice to see in parents. So they just seemed like really nice people. I would love to meet them. Of course, there were other amazing characters like Aiden, the friend, who just seems like the most confident person. I think Aiden could maybe get his own story, and that would be really fun and interesting to read. There was Mackenzie, the team captain for the football. I would like to know what happened with Nate. What was going on there? Brilliant story, but just a little slight offhand thing. Like, what was that all about? Then, of course, there's Grayson, who is in charge of the queer support group at the school. And I think he could have his own story too. It would be very interesting to find out. Riley, who's obviously going through their journey. And I really think that finding out more about Riley and hoping that Riley's doing well. I just hope Riley's doing well. All of these characters were so endearing and so great, and I fell in love with them. They were real people to me. It really did feel like they were realistic characters and so well written. I really loved being immersed in this book for these characters. The other great thing about this book is the realistic setting. The school felt real, the house felt real, the bedroom felt real. All of the places that were described felt very real to me, were very easy to imagine, but also this was a kind of queer setting. Now, I can't really say it's a queer setting, it's just that there are queer characters, and the idea of LGBTQIA+ is permeated throughout the story, and they felt real. So having other trans characters or non-binary characters, or having someone who's bisexual, but hey, they don't actually say anything about it because that's just who they are. And then when they do, it's like, oh, okay. So for example, when one of the characters is talking about having a boyfriend, Spencer says, oh, I didn't know you were gay. And he says, no, I'm bi. And then automatically Spencer says, oh, I didn't know you were bi. Like, it's just a thing. The queer elements of some of the characters are just baked in, and that felt realistic. So I really enjoyed that. It's more and more my lived experience that I come across people who are LGBTQIA+, and it's just part of my lived experience and it's baked into my existence. So it's nice to see that in a YA novel too. So I was very impressed with how it was dealt with, both as a this is just how things are, but also when it comes to the rural Ohio other people not quite getting it, that there was still tension there as well, which was realistic. Now, as we all know, in America especially, but in many places, there has been a pushback against trans rights, and there are many places in the US where, since the election and different people being elected into different positions, laws have been made, some laws have been enacted, some laws have been put forward, and rights are being rolled back, and that is a scary thing to think about. And the Passing Playbook felt really relevant to today because of that. It felt really relevant to this time period. Yes, it's Pride Month, and yes, it's great that we have Pride Month and that a book like this for YA is in existence, but there are still things that we need to do to improve the situation, and unfortunately not everyone's on board. And that was what was really engaging about this plot. It was realistic in the fact that it's a scary place out there, and yet it's also full of people who are also supportive and wanting to improve the situation. So it was an engaging plot in terms of Spencer's struggles, not just with going to a new school, about what happened in the past, what he'd had to go through before when he was transitioning, but the fact that he was passing, and what does that mean as a transgender man? Is it something that he can just accept and pass in life, or does he make a stand and help and support the rest of his LGBTQIA plus community? And then, of course, his own fight when he needs to make a stand and decide, does he want to come out or continue passing? Because if he continues passing, it means he won't ever get to live his dream of being a footballer. But if he comes out, it's a big struggle, and he still might not be able to live his dream of being a footballer. And that's a really fantastic plot, but also a very real struggle for other people as well in real life. So I really enjoyed the plot of this story. It was very well done and incredibly engaging. Now, as you know, I like a good romance, and I was not expecting romance in this, and I don't know why. Maybe because I had thought of YA as being a very sort of tame thing, but I suppose it's a young adult. It's not like it's young teenagers. These are, I think, I don't understand American sophomores. I don't know, juniors. High school names, I don't know, but they are in high school in America, so of course there might be romantic feelings. I am also asexual, so yeah, that doesn't really other people, yes, do have these feelings. But yeah, the sport aspect I was expecting. It's called the passing playbook. There's a lot of football sports going on, so yeah, I had expected the sports, and I love sports. I love sports stories. They're great. Sports anime, sports manga, I'm a huge fan of. There's always positivity and hope in a sports story, and this was no different. So the sport was there, the sport was expected, and the sport was loved. Great. The romance was hinted at in the description, so I thought, yeah, okay, but I didn't expect it to come in the way that it did, and I also didn't expect to root for it so strongly. Yes, I wanted these two to get together, and yes, I wanted it to be all right, and they obviously have a lot to deal with. The other character, which I haven't really mentioned yet, Justice, he is such a sweetheart, and he seems like such a great guy, and he's also going through it. So although Spencer is the main character, I felt like Justice's story was just as important and just as terrifying as Spencer's. Yes, Spencer had come out and he had transitioned in his old school, and there had been an awful experience, which I won't talk about, but it was something that he went through. And I think that Justice is self-aware enough of his situation that coming out is a genuine concern and a real fear. It's something that he has to deal with, and so I do understand the motivations of his character 100%, and yet, you know, the romance, you want it to flourish, you want it to be successful, you want them to be happy and happy together. So yeah, the romance was very well done, felt very realistic for teenagers, and I loved it. I thought it was super cute. The notion of all of these teenagers having these relationships is very realistic. As much as people don't like thinking about teenage romance is something that is very real. yeah, if you're around teenagers in any way, shape or form, you're aware how much of it is. And that's also something, it felt very real for teenage romance. Like Isaac Fitzsimons is very much aware of what it's like, high school romance taking place. So yeah, realistic romance and realistic sport, and I was here for it. So if you've been listening so far, it will be of no surprise to you that my rating for this book is going to be pretty high. And it is pretty high. It's a 5-star rating. I cannot give it any less. It's brilliant. Highly recommend. If you're looking for a YA, if you're looking for LGBTQIA plus, this is definitely it. But there's also romance, there's also sport, there's also family dynamics. It's just everything. It's such a good, all-round, wholesome book. There's elements in it that make me feel uncomfortable, and I felt anxious, and you are on the edge of your seat. So it was an emotional ride, and there were times I cried when reading this book. It was very, very affecting. So yeah, I can't give it anything less than full 5 stars. If you have anyone who enjoys YA, if you have anyone who wants to read more LGBTQIA plus representation in their books, The Passing Playbook is an absolutely fantastic book to read, and I would recommend. So good. So I hope that you have found this review interesting and useful, and I also hope that you go out and you get The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimons. It's a brilliant job at a debut novel. I am 365-801. I usually do videos on male romance, BL, yaoi, and all that good stuff. If you have found this video interesting, you might want to give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you want, and ring the notification bell if you want to get notified when the next video is up. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!